Hello and welcome to Biblical Breadcrumbs, where today we're in Matthew 6, starting in verse 19, and we're going to go down through verse about 24. It's not about 24, it's just verse 24. That's what we're covering today. Going the next step in this series on the kingdom of heaven and walking through the next little section. Last time we talked about prayers, but prayers were kind of just the microcosm, the little thing that was in the middle of a much larger section. The larger section we talked about, I think it was 3 weeks ago, whenever this is posted, which was Matthew 6, verses 1 through 18, the general picture that Jesus was going to, trying to address. There are too many people who are serving God to try and get something out of it for themselves. And the answer is, don't do that, right? That's not going to end up well for you. You will give, and you will pray, and you will fast, but don't do it to impress other people. If you do it to impress other people, you're going to have missed the point of what it's supposed to accomplish. You don't actually gain anything from it. You see it over and over again in Matthew 6 in verse 1, if you practice your righteousness in front of people to be noticed by them, you won't have a reward. You have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. In verse 4, your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. In verse 6, your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. In verse 18, your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. But if you do it in public, if you do it for yourself, if you do it for your fame, your reputation, for other people to think well of you or whatever it might be, if you do it just to show off how great you are, you're not going to actually gain anything from it. Don't do righteous things to benefit yourself. If you're doing righteous things just so you get an ego boost, you've missed the point. You're not going to gain anything, and it's ultimately going to be worthless. Now, if you remembered the reward for faith, if you remembered what it meant, what you actually got from your Father who is in heaven, right? There's so much talk about this reward from your Father who is in heaven when you do righteous things just to do righteous things, when you're not trying to get all this physical iconography or fame or reputation or whatever it is. If you're doing righteous things just because you want to be righteous and just because you want to be godly, God will give you a reward. What kind of reward is that? What does that look like? Well, maybe if you remembered what the reward would be, you wouldn't be seeking man's attention and wasting your time in that way. If you have God's favor, you don't need man's applause. And so if I am praying faithfully, I don't need other people to see it. I need God to see it and know about it. I don't care what other people think about me, because that's not ultimately going to be relevant on Judgment Day. I care what God thinks about me. If that's not your attitude, then you're probably missing the point. And so pay attention. Jesus' next 3 pieces of wisdom on this, verses 19 through 24, all kind of focus on this idea, to look ahead of you and to focus on what's really important and to not get distracted. God has something planned for you. He wants something for you. And if you go around that, and if you find yourself distracted and going after other things and pursuing other avenues, if you get yourself distracted and you don't know what you're going for, you're not going to end up in a good place. Be careful. You have treasure, you have an eye, you have a master, and if you focus on those things, if you focus where your focus should be, you're going to avoid a whole lot of trouble. What kind of reward do you get for doing righteousness? What kind of reward do you get for just being good, like you're supposed to be? Well, here's some of the information about that. Matthew 6, I'll start reading in verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So then, if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. So if the light that is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Some versions say mammon, some versions say money. New American Standard 2020 just says wealth. Where's your focus? What are you really looking forward to? What are you trying to store up? What reward do you actually want? People who practice righteousness in order to be seen by other people and to be thought well of by other people, they have their reward, is what Jesus says. Matthew 6 in verse 2, they have their reward in full. Verse 5 is the same way. Verse 16 is the same way. If you do your righteousness to be seen by others, that is your reward. But your Father has a different reward for you. What kind of reward do you actually want? Start with your treasure. Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. As you go through life, you're going to earn some rewards. You're going to do some things well, and God's going to, somebody's going to see that positively. You get to choose whether that is God or man. If you do your righteousness just to be seen by men, you've chosen that you just want man to see it positively and reward you for it. If you do your righteousness to be seen by God, just so that you are a righteous person, then you'll be getting your reward from God as you go through this life. You get to choose where your treasure ends up. You get to choose where you store your treasure. Be careful about that and be wise about that. Be smart about it. You have free will. You get a choice of where you get to invest, ultimately. And what Jesus would argue here is do not invest in foolish or temporary or empty places because it's not going to actually benefit you. You're not going to ultimately be blessed if you do that. If you do all your righteousness performatively to get the applause of the crowd, then when you die, all of it goes away. Do you really want to store up your treasures on earth? Where should you place your treasure? Treasure is kind of a weird word. We don't think about treasure all that much. Treasure is like a pirate thing to do, right? Or like what dragons have, and we don't really have that nowadays. This is kind of the idea of where do you put your hope, right? What are you looking forward to? What are you anticipating? What are you investing in? What are you hoping will pan out for you in the long term, right? When you go through as you're working, life advice is invest some for the future because when you're old, you'll have a whole lot of stuff to take care of you. Cool. It's that kind of concept. What are you investing in? Well, you get to answer that question. Wherever you invest is going to grow. Wherever you invest is going to have a bonus and a whole lot of money stored up for you. Where are you going to invest? Should you store up for yourselves treasures on earth or in heaven? You get the choice where you place your hope and what you put your hope in, where you find your ultimate fulfillment, as it were. You get the choice. You have free will. But don't do it on earth because that's stupid, and that's what Jesus' advice is, right? You have free will, but one of the choices is mind-bogglingly unintelligent, so don't do that one. Not on earth. What happens if you store up for yourselves treasures on earth? What happens with the earth? Well, the earth is passing away, 1 John 2, verse 17. The earth and all the things in it are passing away. The desires of the world are also passing away. Great. 2 Peter talks about the world being burnt up with an intense heat. Revelation, people are taken from the world, from the earth, and they're put into heaven if they're righteous. People who are left on the earth are given plagues and pox and pestilence and all these kinds of bad things that you don't want to experience. What happens if you build up an eternity for yourself on the earth, right? What happens if you invest so heavily here? What happens if everything you have is here? What happens if your heart is on the earth when God returns and calls his righteous ones to heaven? What do you lose on the earth? Ultimately, you're going to lose the earth itself. Everything in this world, including this world, has what we call a limited shelf life. Go out and look at the universe. The universe is always running out of energy. My favorite law in the world is in the scientific law or whatever it is, second law of thermodynamics, I believe, which says that basically everything's always breaking. Everything you own in terms of this earth is going to break and destroy. Food you have is going to rot. Computers that you have are going to break down and slow down and eventually wear out. You're not going to be able to take them anymore. Tools that you have will become ineffective. Books that you have will crumble to dust. People that you have will die because that's what people do. Everything you have about the earth, including the earth itself, is temporary, is limited, and all things come to an end. The only thing sure in the world is death, and also taxes, but, that's more a comedy bit than anything. The only thing you have that's sure in the world is that one day you're not going to be here anymore. And if your hope is in the world, what happens when you're not there anymore? Or what happens when the world breaks around you and then you don't have the world anymore and it's changed into something else? Why would you put all your hope in something that is unstable? Earth is fundamentally unstable. Why would you plan long term to have everything here? Don't trust that it will always be here. It won't. Don't trust that you will always be here. You won't. I don't know which will come first. I don't know if Jesus will destroy the world first or if he'll come down and deliver us before that happens. But either way, you're not going to be there. You're not going to be on earth for the long term, unless you take the view that hell is really just earth when God has abandoned it, and then there's a whole different discussion on that. But basically, you wouldn't want to be on earth when everything is going so terribly. Go read the book of Revelation, especially chapters 6, 7, and a few of the other future ones, I think. It's not going to go well for you. Don't do that. That's a whole tangent. That's a whole different theological question. You get the point. If you invest so heavily on the things of this world, it's not going to go well for you. There is no long-term solution that's going to be found here. And even if there was, you wouldn't want to be here. This is a world of sin, a world of corruption, a world where bad things happen to good people. This is a world where, God allows Satan some degree of power throughout the area. This is not a world that's happy. This is not a world that's, beneficial for people in the long term. This is not somewhere that I would want to live 100 years, much less 1,000. Even if you came up with infinite years to spend, if you were some kind of android or lived on in a computer or whatever it is, would you really want to live on Earth? Probably not. So, where should you place your treasure? Where do you really place your hope? If it's on Earth, you've probably missed something. Earth is unstable. Do not trust in it. It's not going to end well for you. Don't put your trust in things that are destructible. Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy. On earth, everything is always breaking down. Natural cycles of life automatically destroy everything that exists. And again, that can be from your technology to your food to yourself. It's anything that you have. As long as you live in a house, your house is going to be falling apart. As long as you use anything, as long as something exists, it's always going to be aging, and age destroys everything. All things it devours, birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard bones to meal, as Gollum would say. It's time. That's what it does. It destroys everything. And sorry if I just spoiled the riddle for you. That's what it is. Time comes for us all. Life will run out. Why would you put your hope in the things that will always be destroyed here? Ecclesiastes 3 is a nice poetic interval where God talks about, or where the writer of Ecclesiastes, presumably or allegedly Solomon, depending on how you look at it, has written out this kind of tribute to God and things that God has designed. He says there's a time for war, and there's a time for peace, and there's a time for joy, and a time for sorrow. There's a time to exist and a time to stop existing. That's how everything is on the world. Why would you put your hope in the things that you know are going to decay? That the rust is going to break it down eventually, right? The moths are going to eat it eventually. Everything returns to the dust it came from in the end. Why would you put your hope in those things? Don't put your hope on earth. Don't put your hope on things destructible. Don't put your hope where thieves break in and steal, where you're putting your hope in the stealable. It's not just that the natural cycles of life tear you down and break things, and, that's just part of life and what happens. It's also that there are bad people. And so whether intentionally or not, if you go through this life, the odds are you'll probably have something stolen from you. I remember when I was young, I had a backpack with some Bible class, with a Bible class book, a broken Bible in it with like sections that were coming out, and a few other papers. And somebody broke into our minivan to steal that thing. I think they thought they were like a valuable electronic or something like that. But we were relatively poor. I didn't have any valuable electronics or really any electronics at all. RIP. Bag got stolen. Never found it. I think they technically found it, but it had been emptied out or something, and I never got it back. So I got a new backpack. It's right here. It just happens, right? As you go through life, people steal stuff from you, and sometimes it is intentional. Sometimes you accidentally leave something, and somebody else comes along and says, "Oh, I guess I'll pick that up." Right? You drop $1 out of your pocket, and somebody takes it from you. They didn't know it was yours. That was unintentional. So that can happen, or it can be absolutely intentional. People break into others' houses and take their things. This, like, life happens, right? You lose stuff to natural forces, sure, but you also lose stuff to other people's evil. What do you have that can't be taken away from you? Think about that, and maybe you start to get a little depressed because the answer is nothing. You get into a bad enough flood. A big enough flood is going to take your stuff from you. Natural disaster, cycle of life. You get into a bad enough person, right? You find a bad enough crowd to hang out with, or somebody just comes into your life and takes everything from you, and you lose all of it. Why would you put your trust in the things that can be so easily taken and co-opted by other people? Don't put your trust on the earth. It's unstable. It won't last forever. Don't put your trust in things that are destructible. They will be destroyed. You can't stop it. Don't put your trust in the stuff that can be stolen, because somebody else can come along and take it from you. Why would you trust there when you can instead put your trust in the assets that are intangible? Store up treasure for yourself in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, or where thieves do not break in and steal. Right? That's the advice. And it's hard to visualize those. Store up treasures in heaven. It's hard to visualize what that actually looks like. And I can't even detail what that actually looks like. What is a treasure in heaven? I don't really know. I get the idea, right? When God says treasures on earth, I kind of know what he's talking about. He's talking about a car or a house or a money or a person or whatever it is. He's talking about one of those tangible assets you can grab onto, and, you have that. You can kind of understand that. Take that understanding of something that you own and apply it to heaven. Now, I don't know what that looks like. It's not like it's not like I have a person in heaven, right? A wife or children or something like that. That doesn't exist in heaven. Jesus is pretty clear about that. They're neither marry nor are given in marriage in heaven, but are like the angels. I don't really know what that means, but I assume that marriage isn't going to exist in the same way, because marriage is really a picture of God and man working together. And when you see God and you are man and you're living right next to him, you don't really need a picture to understand the reality of the situation. So take that, Mormons, right? I don't think you are married in heaven forever, even if you get married in a special temple or whatever it is that weird ritual is doing. Again, cult thing. I guess I'm on a cultist kick this week, making fun of all of them. First on Monday, now today. But here we are. I say that I'm recording this on Thursday, so that feels very weird to say. But first on next Monday, and now on next Friday, which is the day that this releases. And so whatever, you can see this here or you can see this later on. Doesn't really matter. Heavenly treasure is this, again, it's like this nebulous concept. It's like, do I have a mansion over the hilltop? I have no idea. Do I have, is it like a mansion? Is it a hotel room? Is there personal property in heaven? I don't really know. I don't really care, right? That's not the point. The point is not, hey, here's all the details. Here's the kind of food you have. Here's the kind of transportation do you have. Do you get heavenly cars? Do they fly? Do you just get wings and you can fly? Can you just teleport? I don't know. That's not the real point, right? You've got treasures in heaven. You've got something of value that's stored up in heaven. You've got an inheritance. Maybe that's the best way to think of this. You've got an inheritance in heaven. Let me write that down. I'll be right. You got an inheritance where eventually you'll reach a point in life where you will inherit from your family members. A family member dies and passes you a bunch of money. Oh, okay, that's an inheritance, right? That's one way to go about it. You've got the same kind of thing when you hit however old it is, 60 or 65 or whatever it is, and suddenly you can start earning money from something else from the Social Security or the whatever it is that's providing for you. Or you can go into your retirement and take your retirement income because you have something that's stored up to take care of you when you're older. It's that kind of concept, right? You have something that's stored up to take care of you, but it's in heaven. It's not on the earth. It's not dependent on how things go here. It's actually looking forward to heaven and something else that's better beyond this. Heavenly treasure, the point of this is it's beyond the reach of earthly things. It doesn't have the same kind of limitations as earthly things because of it. Some people, when they argue against God, they say it's silly because atheists, for instance, would have to believe that one day there was nothing and then suddenly something spontaneously generated, which doesn't make any sense. And then the argument is, well, you guys don't believe that, but you do believe that there's just this being that kind of exists. Right? How is that any different? And the answer is it's incredibly different because the atheists are arguing that the atheists are arguing, let me get this straight, try and figure out where I was going with this. The atheists are arguing that there is no there is no supernatural anything. Only the things of nature exist. And yet something by definition supernatural happened with spontaneous generation, which just cannot happen. It does not happen here on the earth, and we know that's how that works. Nothing comes from nothing. We understand that's how that works. God, on the other hand, is far outside. The explanation of God is the supernatural, to which the natural things do not apply. Natural rules such as you cannot live forever, they do not apply to God fundamentally because he's outside of the system. He has created a system in which we all work, in which we all experience time, corrosion, decay, and ultimately death, but God is outside of that system. Of course, it's not saying that, there is an infinite being inside of the finite space. It's saying that there is an infinite being who created a finite space that we now exist in. It's very, very different. So, checkmate atheists, right? That's not going to convince anyone who's not convinced already, but that's the explanation. The things of heaven are fundamentally different from the things of earth, is the point. The things of heaven are fundamentally not going to be the same. Earth's things are defined as what is tangible. What can I hold? What can I see? What can I experience myself? What can I take and hold in my hand and use for my benefit? Whereas heaven's things are outside of that. Earth's things get destroyed. Heaven's things don't get destroyed because heaven's things are from the infinite reality where God exists, which is outside of the realm of mankind. He created the realm of mankind. He's bigger than it. He's not adherent to its laws. And the treasure that God lays up for us in heaven is infinitely more than the treasure here on earth. Heavenly treasure is treasure that will not fade away. Heavenly treasure will not be destroyed by the moth and the rust and whatever comes and breaks it down. Heavenly treasure is not something you can steal. There are plenty of bad people on the earth, but they can't take your faithfulness away from you. They can't take your righteousness away or your reward. It doesn't fade. It doesn't get lost. God has it in reserve for you because God is fundamentally different from the rest of this human realm. God exists outside of this. God created the concept of the human realm. When his treasure exists, it's not something other people can take away. So what does it mean to store up treasure in heaven? Like, how do you do that? Well, it's back to chapter 6, verse 1, verse 4, verse 6, verse 18. Do righteous things. Just to do righteous things. Jesus is talking about living a life of holiness just so that you are godly, not so that you impress other people, not so that other people think well of you, but so that you are godly and righteous and good. That's what he's looking for. If you're doing righteous things for just physical rewards, you get them and then they fade away. That's treasure on earth. But if you do the righteous things for the spiritual purposes and the spiritual rewards, those things remain forever. Why act righteously? Because God sees it, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. That's the promise you have. You put your hope, you put your treasure, you put your trust in things on this earth, it'll all burn up. Put your trust in the things of God, and no one can take that away from you. Put your treasure in heaven. It's a conscious choice you have to make, but when you make that choice, you will end up there. Jesus gives us a promise, right? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, verse 21. When you make the choice, you will end up wherever it is your heart is. God as it has been noted previously, God does not see as man sees, God sees the heart. God judges the heart. He will ultimately give you what you want. He will give you where your heart is. And you get a choice on where that is. If you want God, you'll get him. You'll go to heaven and you'll experience all the wonderful blessing that it is. If you want to get away from God, you get what's called hell, which is when God's presence abandons you. Maybe that's physically here on earth. Maybe it's sent off to another realm full of fire and darkness, which can't possibly happen, but God's logic defies man's logic sometimes. I don't know exactly what hell looks like. I don't know exactly what heaven looks like, but it's easiest to describe as heaven is being with God and hell is being away from God, both of those for eternity. You get to choose where you end up. So be righteous. That reward is not going to go away. That's the point, right? Treasure on earth or in heaven. You get to make a choice on where that is, and you will live with the consequences of said choice. What do you want out of life? Where do you want to end up? What do you want your reward to be? Be righteous and be rewarded in heaven. Well, you move on to the idea of eyes. Eyes in light and darkness. Verses 22 and 23 are kind of weird, and they're probably the most difficult verses I can think of in the Sermon on the Mount. I think the Sermon on the Mount is generally pretty straightforward, and I even think verses 22 and 23 are straightforward, but it took me years of reading this and every time seeing it and saying, like, I don't really know what that means, and then just moving on and just slowly ruminating about it. It took me over years of trying to figure it out where I actually came to a realization of what I think it means. And so I'll try to explain it, but its explanation is not anywhere near as clear and simple and on the surface as I feel like it should be. Maybe it's just due to the how I'm reading it. I'm not really sure. But you have eyes. Are they light eyes or are they dark eyes? You have a basic question here. What is your eye doing? What are you looking at? The eye is the lamp of the body. So then if your eye is clear, the whole body will be full of light. If your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. So if the light that is in you is dark and is darkness, how great is that darkness? You have the idea of eyes. You have the idea of lamps, but then the eye has to be a clear lamp, and that fills your body with light. So your eye is not a light, but your eye is clear, so that I don't know how it's both a lamp and also clear, because lamps aren't clear. Welcome to why I got slightly confused about what this passage meant. If your eye is bad, okay, so if your eye is clear, it's good, but if your eye is bad, it's bad. I don't know why it's not like clouded or something like that. That's terminology that I would use and that I actually have used in my outline, because that helps clarify it for me. I don't really know why it's not stated that way. But here we are. This is why I said it's a little bit obfuscated, like a bad eye, I guess. If your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if the light that is in you is darkness, how can light be darkness? I don't know. Well, how great is that darkness? Oh, there's a problem. So what are we actually talking about here? What I think we're talking about, this is one of those things where usually I can go to the text and say, here's what the text says, here's what that means. Here, it's easier for me to say, here's what I think the text means, and then you go back to the text and you can kind of see how it goes. And that kind of makes me uncomfortable, because, that ends up being a lot more my interpretation of things, and then you hear my interpretation and then you read it back onto the passage. But I also don't know how to get into these couple of verses and then explain it in a way that's helpful, because I find the terminology confusing. If you have driven a car, you know the very basic principle is you go where you look. Don't spend all your time looking at the adverts on the side of the road, because you're going to end up on the side of the road. If you spend all your time turning around and looking back over your shoulder, your car is naturally going to drift in your direction, and you're going to find yourself not going straight anymore. You look ahead of you because you don't want to hit the car in front of you, but you also look ahead of you because you need to know where you're going. You're going to end up wherever you're looking at. So what are you looking at? Right? Be careful what you're looking at. One of the reasons, perhaps, that Jesus warned about adultery so strongly, you shall not commit adultery, but everyone who looks at a woman with lust in his heart has already committed adultery in his heart. Okay, what you look at informs what you do. What you look at informs what you think about. What you look at and what you focus on and what you're seeing, what you're meditating on and dwelling on, all of those kinds of synonyms, they define where you end up. So what are you looking at? Are you looking at stuff that is light, or are you looking at stuff that is darkness? The eye is essentially a filter. To my understanding, the eye is kind of a filter. He's using an eye or heart or kind of like, it's the idea of focus and what you're heading towards. The eye is like this filter through which you experience the world. And so the question is, how is that doing, right? What are the things that you're taking into yourself? What are the things that you're rejecting? What are the things that are becoming a part of you? And then how difficult is it to take that out of you once it's in there? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is clear, your body will be full of light. Everybody's looking at something. The eye is the lamp, not in the sense that it actually broadcasts light, but in the sense of it receives light, I think is how that goes. The eye is that which allows you to experience the lamp, right? God's word is the lamp to our feet and the light to our path. To pull something random, totally out of context in Psalm 119. I think it's verse 105. Could be wrong on that. Psalm 119, right? God's word is the lamp, right? God is the lamp. You are supposed to be the city set on the hill. You're supposed to be a lamp, but that's because you're following after the things of God. That's because you're doing what God has told you to do. The eye is not the light in itself. It's not the goodness in itself. It is your, like you and your heart and your focus. That's not the goodness. You're supposed to be focusing on good things. You're supposed to be looking at the light and taking that in. If you have good eyes, if you have clear eyes, you'll be able to absorb light, and the things in you will be filled with the light that you are absorbing. On the other hand, if your eye is bad, if your eye is cloudy, if you can't really observe what's going on, you're not going to be absorbing the light into you. You're going to be absorbing a messed up version of the light. You're going to be absorbing darkness or something thereabouts. You're going to be absorbing, at best, a half-truth that God has, at best a half reality that's not really real, but it kind of seems like it's okay for a moment, but it's not actually. You're going to be looking and focusing on the bad things. The clouded eyes are a curse. And instead of filling you with good brightness inside, they fill you with darkness and with evil intention. Whatever is in you is going to control you. If the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? If you go to the light and it is messed up, if you take in the things that are no good, how bad is it for you when the darkness gets inside and when that's what you meditate on? How bad is it for you when, through a clouded eye, through a messed up filter, you absorb things that are evil, but you think that they are good, you think that they are righteous, you think that they are light, but the light that is in you is actually darkness? How bad is it when you take into your life things that are evil, but you call them good? What are those who call good evil and evil good? God is not a fan of people who look out at the world and take evil into themselves but think it is righteous. If the things that you take in are corrupted, if the things you're looking at are corrupted, how corrupt are you really? Be careful with your filter. What happens if you have an air filter that doesn't actually filter anything out? Right? What happens if you have a lock on your door, but it doesn't actually lock anything? What happens if your protective measures fail you? Where is your safety? You have an eye that's supposed to be focusing on good things and bringing good things into your life, but what happens if it fails you? What happens if it starts bringing in bad things? Has it really actually helped? What happens when you've been looking at all the wrong things and focusing on all the wrong things? What happens when you've built your life around things that are secretly corrupt and evil? Oftentimes we relegate this concept to just something like pornography, right? You see something that's bad and evil. You look at a woman with lustful intent. Oh, and that was seeing something that was bad. So be careful what you look at. But when you broaden this out, when you think about what's actually being said, it's a much broader idea, right? Time spent looking at stuff you shouldn't brings consequences. That is true for sexual things like pornography, absolutely. That's also true. Proverbs says, don't look at the wine when it sparkles in the cup. Why? Because it looks really good, but when it goes down, it's going to hurt you. So it also kind of applies to drinking, right? What else does it apply to? Doesn't it apply to envy in general? You're looking at things and you want them and you wish you had them. Doesn't it apply to greed in general? You're looking and you wish you had those things, or gluttony could be a part of that. We don't ever talk about gluttony. That's a shame. Gluttony is a horrific sin that we as Americans just kind of live with because, isn't it a natural part for everybody to eat way too much? And the answer is no, it shouldn't be. Maybe we should do something to regulate that. Covetousness is just looking at something that your neighbors have and saying, I want that. I wish, specifically, I wish ill upon them so that I could have that thing instead. But the idea is you're focusing on what you don't have, and you're focusing on being jealous and all these other things. Isn't that the same concept? Your eye filter is focusing on things that are not good for you. Your eye filter is not filtering out the evil, it's actually focusing on the evil. Are there things that make you angry in life? Are there things that upset you and make you mad at how life is going or how the world is or whatever it is? Do you find yourself focusing in on those things and looking into them too much, and suddenly you find yourself angry all the time? What happened to your filter? Your eye is bad. You're focusing on that which is bad. Your eye is clouded. It's not allowing the light in, or maybe it's pulling in that which isn't light. And suddenly the things inside you, even though you may argue, I can be justly or righteously upset about whatever situation, the things that you've taken in are bringing about horrific anger issues in you. Suddenly the light that is in you is just darkness. Sorry for the notification on Windows. I accidentally have my desktop audio on. Suddenly the light that is in you is darkness. How great is that darkness? The things that you look at help to shape the person that you are. There is a reason we are told in Philippians 4 in verse 8. There's a reason this is an oft-quoted verse, and there's a reason Paul wrote it. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if anything worthy of praise, then think about these things. And as for the things you've learned and received and heard and seen in me, which would be the things of righteousness, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Focus on the good things. Look at the good things. Make sure when your eye is pointing at something, it's pointed at something good. You need to do work to clear the cataracts, to make sure your eye is clear and make sure you're getting good stuff, but you also need to work on what you're looking at. Because too many people are looking at bad stuff, and then they wonder why there's bad stuff inside them. Once you've taken something into you, how difficult is it to get out? If the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? That is a lament, isn't it? That's not just like a warning, don't do that. That is a lament. If the goodness inside you is actually corruption, how great is the corruption? How horribly lost you are when you've allowed yourself to fall so far. Be careful what you look at. It has a greater pull on you than you realize. And once something's in your head, you can't erase it. Be careful what you put in there in the first place. Be careful with your eye. The eye is the lamp of the body. It's the filter through which you experience these things. And it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. And sometimes when you're using it for evil, you can convince yourself into thinking you're using it for good. Be very careful with that. Thirdly, and connectedly, we'll talk a little bit more about this issue as you go down, because these are all on the same idea. Thirdly, you have the idea of masters and the ones you're going to serve. Something came up in Luke 5 about how you're going to be a slave or a servant, if it makes you feel better, to one master or another. You're going to obey God or you're not, right? You're on the right side or you're on the wrong side. Maybe one of the reasons I brought that up is because I'm also preaching on this. Right? You cannot serve two masters. Ultimately, you can only serve one. The concept is really simple if we only listened to it. You cannot have two masters at the same time. They are going to conflict. And it may be that you can manage it for a while. It may be that no big problems come up. It may be, you can work two different jobs, right? You can have two different bosses. You can work two different shifts, right, at two different companies or whatever it is. But at some point, even if you balance it for a while, at some point those are going to come into conflict. And one of them is going to want you to work while you're supposed to be working for the other one. And then you have to ask a question, which one do I choose? Who do you really learn from? Who do you really listen to? Who do you really actually obey? God is calling you, but you're also getting called by all these other things, by all these things of the world. What are you actually listening to, right? Are you listening to God, or are you listening to something else? A lot of us say, a lot of Christians say, I'm listening to God. Well, if you listen to God, you wouldn't sin. The objective is to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. God always tells you the righteous thing to do. If you actually listened to God, if you actually obeyed God, then you would just never sin. So if you've ever sinned, then the answer is you don't actually listen to God all the time. You're serving God, sure, and maybe even the majority of time you're serving God, but sometimes something comes into conflict with God and you pick to go with that other thing. I'm glad God has grace to cover some of those failures, but they are failures. And we need to be careful about that. Who are we really listening to, and who are we really obeying? If it was always God, we wouldn't sin, so maybe it's not always God. What is it that we value? That's the basic question. We say that we have treasure in heaven, but do we have treasure in heaven? Are you sure that you have treasure in heaven? Many people say that they store treasure in heaven, but then they don't do things of righteousness, which means their Father's not going to give them a reward because he sees what's done in secret and nothing of it is reward worthy. And so they say they have treasures in heaven, but they don't actually. There are other people who say that they have treasures in heaven and they do the righteous things, but they do it to be seen by people more often than not, or just entirely to be seen by others. And that's not storing up treasures in heaven either. We say we have it, but do we? Are you sure? We say we meditate on good things. We say that we have the eye is the lamp of the body, and the eye is always looking at good things, and my eye is clear. But is it? Are you sure that we meditate on good things? Are you sure that you do? Are you sure that your eye is clear and good? How many people are Christians or claim to be Christians, but they spend their time absorbing inappropriate things in whatever way? When I say inappropriate, right, I think of inappropriate media, which would be, people watching a movie and there's a scene with someone wearing an immodest outfit in it, and that's inappropriate. Okay, I'm going to swear off that, right? I'm not going to watch the inappropriate scenes where people are less than fully clothed. Okay. Do you watch things that are full of violence? We're Americans. We kind of do that, right? We, as Americans, tend to say things that have a lot of profanity are very highly rated, or things that are very sexualized or very highly rated for us. But things that are pretty violent are fairly low on our rating scale. At least for me and a lot of my friends, I can watch something that is very, very violent and it really doesn't bother me at all. Is that good? Is that righteous? Is that something that God approves of? Is that something that's good to focus on? Or is it not? How many Christians, people claim that they are Christians, but they spend their time watching something or reading something that is in some way not appropriate, that is in some way avoiding the rule of good or righteous or holy or honorable or whatever it is. Anything of value. There's a lot of stuff that has zero value. How many people watch that anyway? Be careful what you focus on. We say that we are obedient to God. No one can serve two masters. But too often we are obedient to God except for the places that we aren't. And that's really not serving God after all. That's really just serving something else. Whether it's yourself, whether it's a demonic influence, whether it's, I don't know what you want to claim it is. But it's nothing that's good. We say we meditate on good things, but do we? Are you sure that you meditate on good things? How many people spend their time absorbing that which is bad, absorbing a different master, following a different master, but not even really thinking about it? I can't set blanket rules for you and things that are good or evil to watch. I watch some things that people would consider evil, and I don't consider them evil. I've I have friends who watch other things that I would consider evil, and I'm not going to join them in that. But I guess they can. I don't know. Ultimately, I'm not the arbiter of what is right and what is wrong. Ultimately, all I can tell you is be careful, because you're going to be the one who makes the personal application, and you're going to be the one on Judgment Day who answers to God for the things that you watched or read or otherwise experienced and focused on and fed yourself from. The things that you look at, the things that you focus on, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where your treasure is, there your eye will be also. Be careful what you pay attention to. You're going to make that application, so I'll let you do it. But I do think it's something that you need to think about and take seriously. So the question is, what are you focused on, right? And is it helping you keep God centered in your life? If it is, then great. Keep on that path. If it isn't, then you've got some weeding to do to take that out of your life and replace it with something else that is good. Again, the list in Philippians 4 is pretty specific. Seek righteous things, not unrighteous things. Seek good things, beneficial, blessed things, instead of that which is evil, because that's not going to help anyone. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed and hope you benefited. Maybe that gives you a thing or two to think about. If there's anything, as always, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave those in the public comments down below, or you can find my email somewhere probably and send me something, and I will try to get back to you on that. And if not, then I will see you next week, where I'm preaching something on Monday, and then we have the next step in the class on Wednesday, which will be Old Testament narratives and how you interpret those. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.